appreciate you having joined us. And the structure of the webinar is I will take you through the presentation and then we will have a time for questions. There is a chat box where you can add in your questions, or you can also put your hand up and then you will be seen and be given the microphone. So I hope that you will find this interesting, and it really is very important work that we are doing as we prepare for Codex 2018. I think for everyone on this call, they understand the importance of optimal infant and young child feeding and what it really entails. Very often, the exclusive breastfeeding to 6 months message has been well understood, and many countries have worked hard to really push up their exclusive breastfeeding statistics and figures and prevalence. However, what we realize is that the continued breastfeeding to at least 2 years is also a very important message. And although at 6 months, a child will start getting other foods as well and progress towards the family foods, breastfeeding remains important. And it really is essential that we also make sure we are protecting the continued breastfeeding message. And this isn't always strongly recognized. Because we need to remember that breastfeeding is clearly a human rights issue, both for the child and the mother. And this has been made very clear by the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And the fundamental principle underlying the human rights issue of breastfeeding is that breast milk substitutes should not be marketed or distributed in ways that interfere with the protection and the promotion of breastfeeding. That underpins everything around the human rights issue and breastfeeding. And we need to bear that in mind and really make sure countries are aware of this. And why do we say that? Well, because you can see from this slide that globally, the estimated costs associated with not breastfeeding, as we know from the Lancet series, is really high. And in addition to that, we don't even need to just talk the money, we're talking nearly 1 million child lives that could be saved each year if we had optimal breastfeeding. And that is the exclusive and continued breastfeeding. And yet, breastfeeding is under fire from the global sales of these breast milk substitutes that come to nearly $45 billion in 2014. But the reality is the biggest growth of the breast milk substitutes is happening in the low and middle income countries. And I will show you some figures a little bit later that really show you what we mean by how big those sales are. But the important thing to remember is that breastfeeding actually now is being threatened by this very large competitive claim that the industry has on infant feeding. So what then is Codex, and why is Codex important? Codex Alimentarius is an international standard setting body hosted by the World Health Organization and FAO. And all nations that are member states of the United Nations can be members of Codex and participate in Codex. These standards that are set by Codex offer a huge range of products across many categories. And although the standards for Codex are not binding for countries to follow, it is very important that countries do follow them, because World Trade Organization often uses the Codex standards to deal with disputes. And so although countries can set their own regulations, it's not easy to always deviate from a Codex standard. Why does this matter right now? Well, it is because Codex is currently undertaking a review of the follow-up formula standard, which covers products for children from 6 months to 36 months. Although they have agreed that they will have 2 categories of products, as you can see there, one category will be children 6 to 12 months, and the second category 12 to 36 months. And this standard applies both to the composition of these products as well as the way they are labeled. To this end, the discussion around the composition of these categories of products is almost completed, not quite, but almost. But where Codex is currently focusing is on the issues of the preamble to the standard, the scope of the standard, the definitions that will be used in the standard, as well as the labeling. And as I hinted to you in the previous slide, Codex standards become very important because many countries use them as the basis for their national legislation so that they are aligned with Codex, and also because many countries do not have the resources to develop their own standards. In addition, trade disputes are often settled by looking at what Codex says. So I think you will be able to understand that Codex and the standards it sets around foods for infants and young children can have a profound impact on the health of infants and young children. And we need, as public health specialists, to be very interested and alert to what Codex is doing. The reality is, at the current Codex review of the follow-up formula standard, we are facing very big challenges. This particular Codex committee undertaking the review is called the Codex Committee on Nutrition and Foods for Special Dietary Uses. And the reality is that the industry and industry associations have a very powerful influence both on country delegations and observer organizations. And you will see here are some statistics I pulled from the last Codex meeting, where 40% of country delegates, so people actually representing the governments of the countries, sitting at the country delegation tables, are industry members. In fact, last year, one country, 7 of the 9 delegates at their table were from the industry. And even if we look at the observer organizations, who, although less powerful at Codex, still have a place at the table, we see that 63% of those observer organizations represent the interests of industry. So you are seeing just how big the challenges we face are when you look at industry. But equally, we know that the low and middle income countries also face a number of challenges when it comes to Codex. The first one is that they are often less engaged at Codex than the World Health Assembly. So very often, low middle income countries don't even have delegates attending these Codex meetings, whereas at the World Health Assembly, generally ministers of health go and are visible and seen. What has also happened traditionally with the low and middle income countries is that they have left the decisions made at Codex to the high income countries, because those are the countries that often have more resource, more evidence, more research, and therefore they have more ability to be actively involved in standard setting. The third problem we have with developing countries is there is often very little continuity year by year as to who attends. So you will find that one year a person from agriculture attends, the next one someone from health, or maybe different people within health might attend. And this is problematic because the discussions build up year on year. And it links to the next two bullets I've got on the slide. Unfortunately, many of the countries are not even aware of the issues, and particularly the kind of public health issues that are being raised at Codex. Often, their delegates also lack technical capacity. They're not certain about what the discussion is, or the technical issues, or even the bigger public health issues behind the agenda items. Countries also arrive at the Codex meetings sometimes without any country position. So they feel that they cannot speak up because they are unaware that the country has a position or haven't been informed of the position, so don't feel they can take a stance. And then you do get some countries who attend the meetings but simply remain silent, because the Codex meetings can be intimidating in some ways. All of those are real problems, as well as the fact that many countries send just a trade representative from their embassy to sit at the Codex meeting on behalf of a country. And those trade representatives have not been briefed, they don't know the issues, and of course, as you see, they often represent trade. So it's the financial issues more than the public health. And then the last bullet many of you are aware of is that we have heard and we've seen even at the World Health Assembly the kind of intimidation and the threats that some high-income countries place on the low-middle-income countries that are pretending to are going to take a view different to theirs. So you find that very often the countries feel threatened or they feel they can't speak up. So the reality is, if we look at the issues on the table, the nutrition and health of infants and young children in low and middle income countries are actually the greatest risk individuals when we look at the issue of breastfeeding, exclusive and continued. And yet often these are the countries that have the least voice at Codex. And that is exceptionally problematic and distressing. So the battle we see at Codex tends to be this battle between consumer health and trade. And unfortunately, it would appear that trade is taking preference over consumer health. Take a look at just these figures. These figures are from the Euromonitor sales figures of last year for both the follow-up formula, which is generally the product for the 6 to 12 months, and what's called here growing up milk, which is the product for the 12 to 36 months. And you are seeing on this slide the percentage volume growth of those products in 3 African countries and 2 high-income countries. And I'm sure you will all see the shocking statistic we have there of that the growth of these products is in double figures in the low-middle income figures. Yet, if you look at the high-income countries, the growth is actually negative growth. So the formula manufacturers and the manufacturers of these kind of products are focusing their marketing and advertising strategies on the low and middle income countries, and they are doing so successfully when you see what those figures, those percentage growth figures are. And then you will see against that the stunting figures. And we know that stunting is multifactorial and that breastfeeding is not the only important issue in stunting, but you can certainly see that we know that improving breastfeeding, both exclusive and continuous, really could have a positive impact. So this is why we are worried about what we are seeing happening at Codex. This year at Codex there are going to be 4 critical issues, and they appear on this slide, but I'm going to take you through each issue on its own. So the first issue is the one that we strongly believe that there should be one Codex Standard for follow-up formula, that both these two categories of products, the 6 to 12 month and the 12 to 36 month, should all fall within one standard, but it can have two parts. This has actually, in fact, already been agreed, but is being reopened for discussion where we believe there's no need to reopen. A lot of the countries are saying, well, we need two because they're separate products, it's different things. However, the precedent has already been set for having a single standard with subdivisions. In fact, the infant formula standard is one standard with two parts. The first part covers infant formula, and the other covers formula for special medical purposes. Two divisions within one standard. It exists already, we can follow that. The third point is that we believe there should be a single standard for like or conceptually similar products, that it just makes sense that these follow-up formulas for both these age groups are very like and conceptually similar products. Therefore, why would one separate them into two different standards? It would result, if we still had the one standard, there would now be 5 standards of foods for infants and young children, all making perfect sense, because the one is the infant formula and formula for special medical purposes. The second would be this category, follow-up formula. The third are guidelines on formulated complementary foods for older infants and young children, a very specific standard. The next standard is a standard for processed cereal-based foods for infants and young children, a very specific standard. And the fifth one is a standard for canned baby foods. And our overall worry about the push by many countries to have this standard divided into two separate standards is that it would open the door for these products to be seen and considered as different. And this is the push that we're seeing from the manufacturers for the 12 to 36-month-old product, where you saw they have their biggest growth, not to be called a breast milk substitute. And not being called a breast milk substitute is going to have many possible negative impacts that I'm going to discuss with you now. The reality, and very clearly, is the fact that the world has agreed that all follow-up formula are breast milk substitutes. And this was clearly mentioned in Resolution 69.9, passed by the World Health Assembly in 2016, where the WHO guidance on ending the inappropriate promotion of foods for infants and young children was adopted as part of this resolution, and it was warmly welcomed. And in that document, here is the definition of what breast milk substitutes are. They are products that function as breast milk substitutes. They include any milks or products that could be used to replace milk. They can be in the liquid or the powdered form, and they include follow-up formula and growing up milk that is marketed for the feeding of infants and young children up to 36 months. And these products should not be promoted. So what we are clearly asking for is the second message, is as much as we want these products in one standard together, potentially as two parts, we are saying alignment is critical. Codex documents and World Health Assembly resolutions should be aligned, because Codex standards are there to support the priority areas that have been identified by member states at the World Health Assembly. And the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes and subsequent WHA resolutions need to be acknowledged and recognized when it comes to Codex, because they are made by the highest health policy body in the World Health Assembly. So what we are saying needs to happen this year is that either the preamble for the standard or the scope for each of those two categories of products needs to make specific reference to the World Health Assembly Resolution 69.9, which points to this guidance for the inappropriate promotion and would make sure that these products, therefore, are pulled in to the code and to this guidance. This links in then to the third request, that all follow-up formula must be defined as being a breast milk substitute, because the evidence is very clear that breastfeeding declines when follow-up formula is consumed. UNICEF, in the report they released earlier this year, clearly showed that in many African countries, children are still breastfed at age of 2. But interestingly enough, as wealth increases, we're seeing that continued breastfeeding decreases. So as these products become more available and families buy them, we are seeing a decrease in the continued breastfeeding. And that is problematic when both WHO and UNICEF recommend continued breastfeeding for 2 years and beyond. So there is no doubt that the promotion of these follow-up formula products undermine continued breastfeeding. And that, for public health people, is totally unacceptable. These are all breast milk substitutes, and even the manufacturers promote them in manners that are similar. Follow-up formula is often promoted with labels that look very similar to infant formula, and we call this cross-promotion. And this cross-promotion undermines not only the continued breastfeeding, but can impact even on that exclusive earlier breastfeeding. And the misuse of these products certainly can lead to increased health risks. If you want to see what we mean by cross-promotion, just have a look at this particular slide. Here you can see examples where the logos, the brand names, the colors, even the fact that they are numbered is making you understand as a consumer that these products are similar and linked in some way. So the industry is saying we want to have 2 separate standards for these products because we don't want you to believe that they are breast milk substitutes. Yet look at the very type of promotion they're doing. It shouts, these are breast milk substitutes. There is clearly an agenda here of saying we want to be able to continue to promote these products, and if we define them as breast milk substitutes, they will fall under the code and therefore should not be promoted. And we want that as public health experts. But countries and many governments see it as a matter of trade. The reality is, when we talk about this issue at Codex, countries say to us, but you've made a composition difference. The 6 to 12 month product is not the same in composition as the 12 to 36 months old product. Well, that's true, because as a child gets older, they are getting more of their nutrients from the family foods and less from these products. So these products by nature and by what we're agreeing at Codex have less nutrients mandatory added to them as the products move up the age category. But what we are saying is this issue is not about the composition. It is about the function of these products. Regardless of their composition, these products function as breast milk substitutes because their composition, their consumption, replaces rather than complements the intake of breast milk. So we are saying it's around function that they should be called breast milk substitutes, not around composition. Because even the follow-up formula for 6 to 12 months doesn't have everything that infant formula has. And we all know that even infant formula doesn't yet meet the needs and never will of what breast milk contains. So our ask is that all products in the standard must be defined as breast milk substitutes because we need to ensure that they comply with the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes, as well as the subsequent relevant World Health Assembly resolutions, including 69.9, that welcomed the guidance on ending the inappropriate promotion of foods for infants and young children. Codex itself has even recognized the importance of breastfeeding. And way back in 1976, the Codex Commission, which is the highest body of the Codex Alimentarius, issued a statement on breastfeeding. And here they are very clear that it is necessary to encourage breastfeeding by all means to prevent the decline in breastfeeding that was happening. So we need to draw Codex back to the fact that it has agreed way back in 76, but still there and still relevant, that breastfeeding should be protected and encouraged by all means to prevent this promotion that is occurring of these artificial methods of feeding. The fourth and final issue that we believe is important at Codex this year is going to be around the naming of these products. And we believe strongly that the names for these products should not include anything that gives a misleading feel of a benefit or a claim. The World Health Organization has been very clear in stating that follow-up formula is not necessary. So these products are not even required. However, because the products existed on the market, Codex decided that they should develop standards to protect consumer health. And therefore they agreed to 2 standards, one for ages 6 to 12 months and one for 12 to 36 months. But that does not mean that these products are necessary. Therefore, it is very important that everything in the standards protect breastfeeding. So I want to share with you at the moment where it is. Currently, the products for the 6 to 12 month old category will be called follow-up formula for older infants. And we believe that is an appropriate name. Our problem comes with the name of the product for the 12 to 36 months. The name is causing a lot of discussion and is yet to be decided. But what is being proposed at this Codex meeting is that the name should be formulated drink for young children. And we do not believe that this is an appropriate name for such a product. Because, as I've said, they are globally not considered necessary. The name should be neutral and should not contain any implied benefit or claim to a mother. Therefore, having this adjective formulated could be misinterpreted by mothers as indicating that the products actually have a real benefit, that they have been formulated for these children, so come with all the things that these children need, which is not the case. The problem, however, is that although we believe the name must have the word formulated removed and just be drink for young children, as any other drink for young children, we are up against a hard battle, and even amongst many of the low and middle income countries, they want something more than just drink for young children. And we are completely open to any of you on this call who might have an idea of what we could propose as the name, but without that name making it look like these products bring benefits or have some type of health claim included in the name. So very open to discussion from any of you on the call as to what it could be. So where are we sitting now? We're sitting at a situation where at Codex this year, meeting from the 26th to the 30th of November in Berlin, they will be moving these guidance and standards to the next stage. And Codex works in an 8-step process, with step 8 being virtually the adoption, the final stage they move. So already by advancing to step 5, we are moving this standard on significantly. And the hope is that this will then be wrapped up at the end of next year at step 8. So we have very little window of opportunity left to have the voice heard for these critical issues, of which the 4 main ones I have been sharing with you. Because the hope in the timeline is that these will be adopted in July 2020. So we really do need to be working hard and fast in order to bring about the changes, because we're moving very fast and we will not have long before it's finalized. So what needs to happen? Well, the commercial interests of the high-income countries and the economic interests of the manufacturers of these products is being heard loud and clear at Codex. And we're seeing in what I've showed you in the nature of the delegations, in the kind of proposals that are being put forward, that these interests are very clear. But unfortunately, the voices of the low and the middle income countries are being drowned out. Yet, if we could get those low and middle income countries to engage and understand the significance of the issues for their child's health, we could have Codex put the protection of consumers ahead of the food, trade, and commercial interests. But that is going to require a great amount of effort. And it's one of the reasons we're having these calls, is because we want to ask you as the civil society network of SUN on how can you help ensure that country governments where you have influence and input are aware of the issues, become engaged with the conversation that's happening at the Codex meeting before the meeting happens at the end of November. So you might ask, how can we engage? Well, the first way one can engage is by finding out who represents your country at Codex and ensure that that person knows that the best interests of children should be put first. Often, the Codex contact point for countries might come out of agriculture, might even come out of trade. They might not be someone who comes from health, and they might not understand the importance of the issue. So finding out who they are is really important. And then trying to engage with countries to get them to still attend the Codex meeting if they are still able in Berlin between the 26th and the 30th of November would be a win. If they're already attending, would be to ensure that the representative that is attending understands these critical issues that I've highlighted to you and really feels they can engage in the subject, that they don't sit silently. And then, if they cannot attend, they can still develop a strong country statement that can be submitted to Codex ahead of the meeting and that actually has to be considered by Codex when they deliberate this, even if the country isn't in the room. On the left side, what I have showed you then are some resources. The website I've given you against number 1 is the website that gives the email address of the Codex representative. Unfortunately, it doesn't give the person's name. It often just says Codex focal point at xcountrygovernment.org. So we don't get the exact name through that place on Codex, but we get the email address. Engaging, the meeting is happening on the 26th to the 30th of November. If you want to help us ensure that the representatives attending understands the issues, there are a number of Codex briefing resources, and you will be able to find them. I will give you on the next slide on the ARCH website of Helen Keller International. All the documents are available, many of them in English, French, and Spanish. Can countries still develop a strong country statement? The answer is yes. Although the deadline for submission of country comments was down as the 26th of October, the reality is that the Codex Secretariat continues to receive country comments right up until almost the week before the meeting, which is the 16th of November. So countries have not yet missed the boat. They can still make sure their voice is heard, either by being at the meeting and speaking up or submitting a strong country statement before the meeting that has to be considered by the committee at the meeting. So with that, you will be able to see where you can download copies of all the HKI briefs. You will see that it is a matter of going to the archnutrition.org website. Arch Nutrition, standing for the Helen Keller International Project called Assessment and Research in Child Feeding, that has been undertaken by HKI, and where all these briefs are available. And once you get to the archnutrition.org website, you will see there is a resources tab. Otherwise, if you take down this whole address, which we will also share with you, you can then simply load and download all these documents so that you have what you need to be able to share. We have documents on why breastfeeding matters after the first year of life. We have a document that summarizes exactly these 4 issues. It's a full briefing document. And we have a number of other documents, including a human rights approach to protecting breastfeeding, as well as a document that really covers the issues at hand. So with that, what I'm really wanting to say to all of you is we're urging you to help us make sure the low to middle income countries get to speak out strongly so that we can protect continued breastfeeding.